Hello, and welcome to Tools Tuesday here on Answer Everywhere. Today we're taking a look at the bug tracker Bugzilla, which is pretty old. It's from the late 1990s, I think around 1998, made by Netscape for the Mozilla browser, which is now essentially Firefox. It's an older program, but I think in a lot of sense, it kind of sets the tone for every other bug tracker that you've ever used. In particular, my own experience uh, has been I've used the GitHub issues, and I've used the bug tracker within Google, which is called externally IssueTracker, and and IssueTracker seems to owe a pretty big debt to Bugzilla. And then Google also has this bug tracker that's called Monorail, which is essentially more or less a reimplementation of IssueTracker from for the Chromium team for the open source world, and is also owes a big debt to Bugzilla. And they actually say so. I think in their documentation that the design for Monorail, or the need to create Monorail, grew out of their experience with other bug trackers, and in particular, they cite Bugzilla as an example. So, because of that sort of history, and because I so far haven't seen a great bug tracker of any kind, I figured we'd go back to Bugzilla and start here, and kind of see what they have to offer, and that will help us understand other bug trackers of the future, or rather of the present. So let me just for fun, I'm sure we can find the Mozilla bug tracker instance. So here's an active instance of Bugzilla. If I search bugs, let's search maybe for JavaScript. We get a list of bugs. The bugs have IDs, which are integers. They are probably, almost certainly, I think, like auto increment integers. You start with bug 1 and move forward. So bug 17.17.597 was filed after bug 17.11.284. Probably. You can see that here. And if you click on a bug, you get some sort of information about it. You get below comments, which is a discussion thread of various things. And you can attach files, and we've got metadata. So this is a bug of type defect. It says Twitter feeds paint very slowly 2 years ago. And if you read through all of this, you can follow and track all the history of the bug. So what do we expect to see? Well, I happen to know that Bugzilla is written in Perl. I don't read Perl, but we'll try to figure out what they're doing. But it should be relatively simple. This is essentially an interface to a database, and the database is going to have tables for things like comments and attachments, and there will be facilities for having user identities, logging in, setting permissions on various objects. But at the end of the day, it seems like mostly what's going on is they're going to grab stuff from a database and display it on an HTML page. And again, since most bug systems are not are all kind of not great in their own way, this is more or less the way to start, I think. And then what you do if you have a bug system like Jira or whatever is you add features like workflow features, and you try to add value that way. And for that reason, it's hard to find like a Bugzilla built, a bug tracker built after Bugzilla that doesn't try to bloat everything up with a bunch of features that may not fit your workflow. And then more recently, we have things like GitHub issues, which kind of feels like somebody just hooked up like a NoSQL database and called it a day. When I was at Google, I always thought Bugzilla felt clunky and old and outdated. But when I had to deal with GitHub and the GitHub tooling, I felt even more like I was visiting, like I was, like I longed for the way in which some of the internal Google tooling was well thought out and more easier to work with. So that's kind of my take. So let's dig into the code. Oh, we get this bug guy. How do I get? Oh, I have to. If I hover, I get a bug. Hi, that's a very friendly looking bug. Maybe one more thing I should mention before I start is that I'm aware that Bugzilla is trying to. I think it's called Harmony. There's a thing that they're trying to do for their next release that I don't think is really ready yet, as far as I remember from maybe a month or two ago. I'm not sure which code base I should be looking at. The one on the 5.2 branch is pretty old. But I guess my feeling is, since we're treating this as an older project and the new version isn't released yet, it'll be good to look at the original version. And then if for some reason we decide that we want to look at the new version as well, we can do that at a later date. So here's their GitHub page. And we've got some CGI scripts, which might be important. Let's see what we got. We have attachment. That is maybe for adding attachments to bugs. We have a bug list. That might be crucial. Charts, check setup. So these might be really important. These look like these might be the fundamental files of Bugzilla. What do we have in the folders? We've got a Bugzilla folder, which we'll definitely look at. Contrib, that should be things like contributions, maybe third-party contributions. Extensions might be similar ways of extending Bugzilla. Images, who knows? Maybe image files for the website or whatever. I was unaware that there's any JavaScript. Let's actually see what GitHub says. 3.9% JavaScript, 93% Perl. So I guess I'm going to ignore the JavaScript for now. I don't know if it's essential. And I guess we'll look at in lib. T might be tests, and I have no idea what XT is. I guess we'll look at JS just for fun. So I'm going to look into these folders, try to close them out quickly, and then get to the CGI files. So here's Bugzilla. These are all Perl stuff. Okay, so this looks like an essential folder. Not so surprising. Here's lib. It just has a README. This directory contains the Perl modules that Bugzilla requires to run. But it doesn't actually seem to. Or maybe it's filled by like cpan or whatever the Perl thingamajig is. These T might be tests. Let's look at pod. I don't know what a pod is. We have Bugzilla test 11, pod validation. This seems to be Perl. We've got this use stuff, use lib qw. Okay, so it's some test. We've got a for each. Okay, so T is test. I'm going to assume XT. These seem to be more tests. The tests in this directory require a working database, as opposed to the tests in T, which simply test the code without a working installation. So XT is maybe integration tests. Here's JS, and there's a bit of JS. Let's see, we've got attachment, bug.js, comments, custom search. So maybe some of this is important. 9 years ago, 12 years ago. So this is not like new stuff. Let's take a quick look at bug.js. How big is it? 243 lines of code. And, oh, Yahoo. I don't know if Yahoo is a library. This library assumes that the needed YUI libraries have been loaded already. Let's see what YUI is. A free open source JavaScript and CSS library for building richly interactive web applications. Is this from Yahoo? Yep, the Yahoo interface library. Okay, so they're using some library, some JS library from Yahoo. If you're a JS developer and you still use the Yahoo UI libraries, let me know. I'd be interested to know. I'm going to ignore the JavaScript stuff for now. I think the real stuff is going to be in Perl. But let's check out what these CGI things do. So in Perl, we have, let's see if we can match some stuff up. So we've got attachment.pm. And do we have an attachment CGI? Yeah, we do. So let's see what the CGI does. It's also Perl. And it's 849 lines of code. So this seems to be doing real stuff, including data validation. All right. So what is this attachment.pm doing? This attachment.pm is longer, 100 or 1055, let's call it. And I'm not sure. So so the CGI code should be for being called from like Apache on that when it calls common gateway interface scripts. I don't know if these are the same implementation for different Apache modules or something, or if these two somehow work together. Maybe one imports another. Use, I guess, is the equivalent of an import statement in Perl. So we're going to use Bugzilla attachment, and I'm going to guess this is Bugzilla attachment, package Bugzilla attachment. So this thing, the .pm file is lower down in the stack, and the attachment.cgi file, I guess, is calling out to it. And so let's see what sort of things the attachment.cgi file is doing. So for most scripts, we don't make CGI and template global variables. But when preparing Bugzilla for Perl mod, this script used these variables in so many subroutines that it was easier to just make them globals. Okay. All calls to this script should contain an action variable whose value depends on what the user wants to do. The code below checks the value of that variable and runs the appropriate code. So this is kind of dispatch. If none is applied, we default to view. So you pass it some action. I guess in view is the default. And I guess you also pass it some format, in the default format, I assume, is the empty string, if I'm reading this correctly. I don't know what my does. My format. Okay, and then we've got this big if statement. And it's just branching off of the action. So if we have view all, then we're going to call the view all function, I guess, maybe in this file. But if the action is enter, we're going to call Bugzilla login with login required, I guess maybe as a Boolean about whether you need to be logged in. And then we have some data validation stuff for security and authorization. It validates an attachment ID. I don't know what an attachment ID is. And it optionally takes a variable name that contains the ID to be validated. If the second parameter is true, the attachment ID will be validated. However, the current user's access to the attachment will not be checked. So the second parameter is don't validate access. So we validate the ID and we optionally check, I guess, authorization. We have things like checking that the attachment is public. We've got a getter for the attachment, which is presumably going to go into the database. Gets the attachment objects generated by validate ID, while ensuring attached base and token authentication is used when required. I don't know what attached base is, but maybe that's an attachment database. Make sure the attachment is served from the correct server. So CGI URL is attachment base, bug ID. Maybe attachment base is like the base of the URI. Okay. So let's see, what else do we have? We've got a view, sub view, maybe sub is subroutine. And the view displays an attachment. Interdiff. Probably some sort of diff. I assume we've got a view all. We can insert an attachment. Insert a new attachment into the database. Okay. So this is maybe the C of CRUD. But this might all predate CRUD. So I guess the CGI files are doing database access, among other things. We'll see if the other file also does database. And we get things like delete attachment. And so let's see if we can find where Bugzilla attachment is being used. So I'm not sure if you have to call routines with this particular string, but I guess we can search for it. So make sure the attachment exists in the database. So we call a new Bugzilla attachment, some stuff, and we get an attachment. So maybe the attachment file, the Perl file as opposed to the CGI file, is defining things like what you would consider objects in other languages. We've also got this patch reader that is being called. Where else is it being called? Patch reader, get attachments by bug. Check bug. So maybe the Perl is also doing direct access to the database, and the CGI is doing indirect access. So those are some hypotheses. Let's go ahead and look at the actual Perl file. Okay, so these maybe look like comment strings. Okay, so this is a class, the attachment class. And we can get the attachment from the given ID and maybe cut ends the comment string. Then some use statements that are basically imports. Initialization. Okay, here we go. So we've got a database table, which is called attachments in a field and some columns. So this is close to the database. Update comments, columns, QW. I'm not sure. Query with. See if we can find what QW is. Util QW. Some utility. But these are the fields. We've got an attachment ID, a bug ID, a creation timestamp, a description of the attachment, I assume, a file name for the attachment, whether it's obsolete, if it's a patch, maybe like a patch for the source code, something to be kind of like a commit, a MIME type, modification time, and the ID of the submitter. And then we've got these update columns. Maybe these are columns that can be updated and everything else is immutable. Then we've got some validators. And this kind of looks like a hash map, essentially. So if you want to validate a bug, maybe it calls the check bug function. If you want to validate a description, I guess it might call the check description function. I don't know what and slash and underscore means, but I guess we'll ignore that for now. And then we've got more things that kind of look like comments, but they're not. I don't think they are accessors. So we've got equal pod equal head to instance property. This does look like text instance properties. These do look like comments. So but we do have a subroutine. The bug ID returns whatever and underscore indexed at 0 the bug ID. Maybe this bug ID. Okay, cool. So that's attachments. So I'm guessing that like if you're familiar with something like ORM, then maybe the Perl files are doing a lot of what you would get from an ORM system. They're basically interfacing with the database, encapsulating access to the database, and providing a higher level function, a higher level API that's more Perl-like. And that API is what's being called by the CGI script. So that's my sense. So with that in mind, let's take a quick look at bug PM. That'll be an important, important thing. The DB. I guess I'm curious what a group is, because a group will be an important unit of permissions. So you might have like, if you might have team leaders or whatever are able to do certain things to the bugs, and then developers on the projects are able to do slightly fewer things, and then the masses might be able to file bugs but not change priority and stuff like that. And so you would imagine that a lot of that's done by assigning different groups, and that way you can set the permissions on the group level, and people can join or leave the group as they change roles or whatever. And I guess let's look at user. And maybe web service. Then we also have a bunch of these folders. So we have this like attachment folder and a DB folder. Since we already looked at attachment, let's see what's in the attachment folder. It's a patch reader. Just one thing. I guess this is for reading patches. Let's see what's in another folder. DB. Oracle. Okay, so in the DB folder, we have what seems to be implementations for specific databases. So this is another sort of familiar thing where when you program an app these days, you don't have to care typically whether it's a MySQL database or a Postgres or SQLite. There's some layer of code that abstracts all those details from you. And that seems to be what's in this folder. What about auth? We have login and verify and persist and login. All right. A job. I don't know what a job is. Okay, so a job seems like mail. When you change stuff, you might get an email that your bug has a new comment or that you've got a new bug filed in your bug queue or whatever. And do we have a bug folder? We don't. Okay. So look at bug PM. Imports look sort of nothing really jumps out. We've got some utilities, including a bunch of this QW stuff. Let's see if QW is a Perl thing. Perl QW. QW operator is used to extract each element of the given string as it is an array of elements in single quote. What? Nope. Are there Perl docs? Here we go. So here's the Q is some sort of quoting thing. Q of string is a single quoted literal string. QX is a string which is possibly interpolated and then executed as a system command. Is that right? Where's I don't see the QX being used here, but that's okay. Can we find QW? QW of string evaluates to a list of the words extracted out of string using embedded white space as the word delimiters. It can be understood as being roughly equivalent to split on the space character, but I guess it says white space, so maybe it's more general. So you would use it basically to pass in, like when you're typing a shell command, you separate arguments by spaces. And I guess what this is doing is it's allowing you to type in that way, and then when it passes to something like the shell itself, you actually want those things to have been parsed into different words. And so I guess that's what the sort of thing is QW is doing. Okay. All right. So here's bug again. So more utils. I guess QW is just allowing you to import multiple utils, like first, IDX, unique, and part. Okay, and we've got more DB stuff. The bug is database. Bugs is the database table. We're gonna, I guess, order on the ID field, which again is probably starting at 1 and auto incrementing. Then we have DB columns. And the columns are things like who's the bug assigned to, the bug file location. I guess if it's a bug in a specific source file, maybe the bug has an ID, and these are in alphabetical order, I guess. The severity of the bug, its status. Severity is like if it is this critical. Status might be things like is it open, closed, new, fixed, that sort of thing. CC list accessible. This might be things like are people who are CC'd on the bug able automatically to access the bug, or maybe if this is false, you can get CC'd on the bug and not actually be able to see it. I'm not sure. A component ID. I think if this is similar to IssueTracker, then a component is roughly similar to like a project. Like your team and the next team might be working from the same Bugzilla installation, but you might have different components, or it might correspond maybe to products. A creation timestamp, a delta timestamp. I'm not sure what delta that's referring to. Estimated time, this might be like how long do you expect the bug to take to resolve. Whether it's ever confirmed when it was last diffed, but not as a, it doesn't have a timestamp suffix. I'm not sure if last diffed is also a timestamp. Something about opsys, no idea. Priority is probably bug priority, like how is this an urgent bug, or is this something we can take a while to fix? A product ID, a QA contact for quality assurance, almost, probably. Remaining time, maybe that's somehow computed from estimated time, or maybe this is like there's like a separate deadline. Rep platform, I don't know, maybe the platform used to report the bug, whether the reporter is accessible. Resolution, I'm not sure what that could be a few different things. A short description of the bug, a status whiteboard. I don't know what that is. Maybe that's like links to another external resource where there's information on the status. I don't know. A target milestone. This is probably for things like when you have a roadmap for your project. You might assign, that roadmap, each kind of milestone on that roadmap might have a collection of bugs that go with it, and a version, I guess maybe a version of the bug. And we're just going to, interact with the database. We've got some hooks. So Bugzilla hook process, bug columns. So I'm guessing that this is like, as you do bug column stuff, this says process anything in the bug columns hooks. So maybe we can figure out where hooks are. And then we've got a bunch of validators. Let's see if we can find one of the validators. I guess let's see if we can find check comment. So here's a subroutine check comment. No idea what this and underscore thing is. Invocant comment text undefined in params. So a comment can be empty. We should force it to be empty if the text is undefined. If not defined comment text, then we'll set the comment text to empty. We can look up some data. So is private is equal to delete params comment is private. I'm not sure what this delete is doing. Load up some data, not look up some data. And then timestamp is, we're just looking in the params at the creation timestamp. And we can create a new comment so we can check it. So we're copying, I guess, the comment text and the timestamp to a new comment object or something like that. We don't include the is private column unless it was specified. This allows us to fall back to its database default. We check if it's defined, and then validate the comment. The validator, we're calling Bugzilla comment check required create fields. So we have some number of fields that are required, I guess, for the comment. Probably, I would guess, required in the database. And this is going to check that. And we can also do run create validators, skipping bug ID somehow. And then we're going to return the comment. I don't think we've inserted it, right? So we're just checking it. Okay, so this is all actually pretty straightforward. Modulo not being able to read Perl. Okay. We can check a component. Whatever blessed is. Product is blessed of invocant. Invocant. Let's see if we can find blessed. I wonder if this is a Perl thing. The blessed function. The function returns the reference to an object blessed into class name. Let's try Stack Overflow. In general, bless associates an object with the class. So we have package my class, and we take some object, whatever my is, and then I guess Bless is going to say object is kind of type my class. My seems to just be new. The my function. A my declares the listed variables to be local, lexically, to be local, so to be lexically local to the enclosing block, file, or eval. If more than one variable is listed, the list must be placed in parentheses. So I guess it defines a local variable. Okay. And we've got things like check date field. All right, so that's bug. That's pretty straightforward, I think. Here's DB. I'm not sure if we're going to see anything especially interesting in DB. We have proxy methods to the DBI object. I don't know what all that is. We've got some stuff about blob types. Here's some default values that are used for the enum types. So the bug severity, I guess by default, the bug severity are these things. And then maybe you can add your own severity levels as well. The priority levels is this highest, high, normal, low. Highest, high, normal, low, lowest, etc. Opposite. Oh, opposite is operating system, things like Windows, Mac OS, Linux, and other. And rep platform. I guess maybe the operating system essentially of the reporter. And the bug statuses can be unconfirmed, confirmed, in progress, resolved, or verified. And then resolution is either the empty string, fixed, invalid, won't fix, duplicate, and works for me. So maybe this is interesting from the perspective of like this is db.pm. So this is like a specific workflow that's kind of baked into the source code of Bugzilla. Seems like a pretty good workflow. And it seems like it makes sense to start somewhere. But this is actually baked pretty deep in the source code. And I'm not sure, like, if you wanted to change one of these, like, let's say you want to make a fork and you wanted to change the workflow here, would that cause other things to break? I don't know. And would it be obvious if something broke, or would it only be obvious like at runtime? So I have no idea, but I just think that's a little bit interesting. Okay, connect shadow connection methods. So these are methods for connecting. Try to connect to a non-existent shadow DB. I don't know what shadow DB is, but maybe some sort of database. Okay, and so these are just database connection things. I'm wondering, there must be like a Perl database, DBI and DBI connector, I guess, are the dependencies that are actually connecting to databases. So let's look at group. I just want to see what sorts of things a group has. A group has an ID, a name, a description. Whether it's a bug group, a user regex, maybe a group can be defined as like all users matching a regex. Whether it's active in a URL for the icon of the group. Okay. And we can get the direct members. And can we get the indirect members? Members non-inherited. I don't know what non-inherited means, but we've got this self thing, which is @_:. And we're calling self members non-inherited, or maybe or equals self get members. And we're returning self members non-inherited. I guess we're somehow modifying members non-inherited by the current members and then returning the value after it's been modified. And then maybe get members is for as both direct and non-inherited. So we've got something about a grant type. I don't know what a grant type is. And a DBH, which I think is just the database thing. Oh, grant type, I guess, is like database. Grants are used, I guess, in database lingo for like kind of like permissions. So I guess we're looking at maybe database permissions. And we're doing some SQL, selecting distinct user IDs from a user group map where isBless equals 0 and grant clause and group ID equals some stuff. We're requiring Bugzilla user. Is this like a lazy import maybe? And we're going to return Bugzilla user new from list of the user IDs. So we're just getting stuff from the database. From a user group map. Okay. I don't know if we're using the database's own system, like the database's own user system. Here's user. Maybe this will tell us. But also, I want to know now what a user group map is. Maybe I just closed the thing that will tell me. Maybe the internet knows. What about with underscores? Presumably it's a map from users to groups or vice versa. Flattened group membership accepts a list of groups and returns a list of all the groups whose members inherit membership in any group on the list. Okay, so all the groups whose members inherit membership in any group on the list. And it's taking in a list of groups. So this is like the transitive closure of the list of groups you pass in. So we can determine if a user is in any of the groups, input the flattened group membership by querying the user group map for any user with direct or regexp membership in the list of groups returned. Okay, so this is doing some sort of transitive closure, and it's doing it by the user group map, which is probably essentially an adjacency list. But I'm not going to look too far into it right now. Okay, here's a user. So the columns, we have a user ID, a login name, a real name. My bug links as show my bug links. I guess when you log in, maybe you can see your bugs. Disabled text, disabled mail. I'm not sure really what that is. Something about disabling stuff. An extern ID and whether the user is enabled. Yeah. We've got some validators, including a crypt password validator. I'm curious what extern ID is. Check whether the extern ID is unique. See if we can find Bugzilla extern ID. I'm wondering if this is for things like federating with LDAP or something. Extern ID is some string that uniquely identifies the user in an external account source. If this extern ID already exists in the database with a different username, the username will be changed to be the user specified by this login data. That is, let my extern ID be mcanat. I already have an account in Bugzilla with the username mcanat@foo.com. But this time when I log in, I have an extern ID of mcanat and a username of mcanat@bar.org. So now Bugzilla will automatically change my username to mcanat@bar.org instead of mcanat@foo.com. That seems like odd behavior. Okay. So some sort of link identifies the user in an external account source. So these are users that Bugzilla is not managing, but can somehow interact with. All right, here's web service. And this is, we've got some JSON RPC to convert incoming dates. Okay. And some login stuff. We've also got, okay, I can interact with this API with XML RPC, JSON RPC, or REST. Cool. And it seems to all be strings. Maybe everything is in the folders. Let's look and see if there's a web service folder. There is. And we have things like group, classification, flag type, constant. So this is like the API And under server, we have JSON RPC, REST, and XML RPC. And so presumably these are going to accept requests in these formats and translate them into the into whatever Perl wants to see. I guess let's take a quick look at, let's look at Bugzilla. Basic info that's needed before logins. So some stuff for logins, stuff about whether things are read-only, public methods, parameters for logged out users do not need to know more than that. So I guess if you're logged out, you just see the maintainer and require login. And then logged in people get to see these parameters are guessable from the web UI when the user is logged in, so it's safe to access them. Okay. Allow email change, default severity, mail from, Okay, so these are like, these are things that are like configuration options, I guess, for the Bugzilla installation. And it says that they're guessable from the web UI. So I guess you can figure out the defaults, maybe by filing bugs or something. Cool, let's take a quick look at the bug PM in the web service. And again, we have this distinction between read-only, public methods, attached map returns. And then we have methods, which are maybe like handlers. Subfields. We've got self and params. We're going to validate maybe the request, the IDs and fields. They're going to switch to ShadowDB. Maybe ShadowDB is like an in-memory version of the DB. We'll look this up in a second. And then we've got something about maybe getting the fields, like pulling them out of the request possibly. What does another thing look like? Legal field values. Push. I guess push is the thing that we're going to return. And we'll return things like name is open, stored key. I guess this is when you make a request and you get the return value, that's what this is for this particular API element. Similarly for comments, let's see if this ends in a push. This has a return at the end. Okay. I'm just getting a feel. So let's look up the ShadowDB. Maybe this is a general term about the Shadow database. The Shadow database is created and deleted automatically each time you run a development-focused command and is primarily used to detect problems such as schema drift. Shadow table. Oh no. Objects in computer science used to improve the way machines, networks, and programs handle information. That's an uninformative sentence. Contains data similar to the primary table, which is shadowing. Usually contains data that is relevant to the operation. Shadow tables are treated as data type trails in data storage systems. Okay. This is not a great Wikipedia article, but I think we have a sense of what shadow databases are. All right. So I think this is going to be a short video. I'm not sure if there's really anything else I need to see about Bugzilla. Let's take a look at hooks. Here's a random number generator. Status, template, update, wine. So what do we have for hooks? We have in. We're going to set hook name to shift, whatever shift is doing. And we'll say that we're currently in Bugzilla request cache hook stack -1 or empty string. And we're going to return hook name. We're going to return, I guess, a Boolean, whether hook name is equal to the thing that we're currently in. So this is, I guess, you can ask a hook whether it's currently running, maybe. And the thing that has the truth about what's running is this request cache hook stack thing. And similarly for whether we are entering, we're going to look at the hook stack. Or maybe this is for actually entering, because the last thing we do is we're going to push. Maybe push is like stack push. So we're going to push onto the hook stack a hook name. So maybe push was it was wrong in the other file. I'm guessing that push is a stack operation that pushes the second thing onto the first argument. And as we're leaving, we're going to pop off the request hook stack. Okay. But what else can we do? Doesn't seem like it's doing much. It's gonna. There should be something to execute, right? So leaving, process. Okay, process. I guess it might be execute. So I guess name and args is this. Let's see. The Perl this. A useful mnemonic for Perl sigils are scalar, array, and ash. What is an ash? Perl sigils don't denote variable type. They denote conjugation. $sign is the, at is these, and percent is map of. And so variable type is denoted via square brackets or curly braces. Interesting. So I guess this is probably supposed to be pronounced hash, but I guess it kind of looks a little bit like an H. Okay. So what is at underscore should be, I guess, an array called underscore. I don't think I can search for this. Yeah, again, what's the meaning of at underscore? Add underscore with the subroutine, the array add underscore contains the parameters passed to that subroutine. Okay, so it's kind of like this. It's the parameters that are passed to it, and so we get the name and args of the parameters. We say that we're entering the name, and then for each extension in Bugzilla extensions, we're going to iterate over whatever extensions we've enabled. If so, I guess extensions have this can function that look at the name and check whether they can operate on them. Then we're going to call extension on the function with the name given the args, and then we'll call leaving. And that's what a hook does. Okay. That seems relatively simple. And I think that's basically it. We look at search. Recent save, clause group condition, quick search. Do they implement their own like search engine? Oh, this is just going to be passing through the database, right? We've got things like negating, as parameters, as string, operator, fav, is that field of view? And then presumably they're just calling out to SQL somehow. These look like just utilities. Maybe look at clause. A new clause, a child clause, update search args, a joiner, clauses maybe, has translated conditions, add. So what do we do if we add? Whatever a shift is. So let's look at Perl shift. Wait, is there a Perl? Did you do it? Perl? Hey, look at that. All right, shift array shifts the first value of the array off and returns it, shortening the array by 1. This is kind of like consuming an element of a linked list, it sounds like. I don't know how Perl arrays are implemented, but I guess we're going to consume an element and call it ourself. And then we're going to call children on self and get the children. And then if at underscore equals 3, I guess the something about what's passed in, then we're going to push the children, whatever condition is. I guess we're adding a condition to the clause, and then we're going to return. So we're, I guess, keeping the clause somehow has like a stack of conditions. And then we're going to set my child to whatever at underscore is. And if it's not defined, we'll return. But if it is defined, we'll check if it's whatever a package is a package, or it's a Bugzilla search condition, or say that it's not the right type. And then the last thing we do is we push the child onto the children. Okay. That's what happens if @ underscore is not equal to 3. Maybe if you're calling with a different number of arguments, it does different things. Then what about negate? If we negate, we're going to get self and value from @ underscore. And I guess maybe if there's 2 arguments, then we'll say self negate. I guess we have just some negate parameters equal to the opposite of its value. And then we'll return the value of self negate. And then we can walk conditions. This should be a tree walk. Creating the self and the callback. And for each child, if the child is a search condition, I think we decided that a clause has a bunch of, like a stack of search conditions. Then we're going to execute the callback on the self and the child. Otherwise, we're going to call child walk conditions. Okay. That's actually mildly interesting for search. At some point, it must actually like conduct a search, right? So recent clause group, condition, quick search. These don't seem like those are things that execute searches. Maybe search.cgi or something. Maybe search.pm. We should see something here where it takes a clause and turns it into a thing, like a SQL thing. Here's a description of Boolean charts. A Boolean chart is a way of representing the terms in a logical expression. Bugzilla builds SQL queries depending on how you enter terms into the Boolean chart. Boolean charts are represented in URLs as 3 tuples of chart ID, row, column. The query form, query.cgi, may contain an arbitrary number of Boolean charts, where each chart represents a clause in a SQL query. The query form starts out with 1 Boolean chart containing 1 row and 1 column. Extra rows can be created by pressing the AND button at the bottom of the chart. Extra columns are created. Oh, this is some like UI thing as well, I think. All right, whatever. So something's going to happen, and they're going to do stuff with it. We've got a number regex that looks fancy. We've got some operators like equals, case, substring, not regex, matches, etc. More operators. Yeah, this is pretty involved. Maybe this is Bugzilla's main, the main thing that it does. Something about special parsing. These are fields where a special action is taken depending on the value. This is actually pretty interesting. Got user field. All right, so where's the algorithm? So column joins. This describes tables that must be joined when you want to display certain columns in the bug list. For the most part, search.pm uses DB schema to figure out what needs to be joined, but for some fields, it needs a little help. So assign to, from assign to user ID profiles, inner. So I guess this is somehow recording that we want to know what bug something is assigned to. I guess it's probably assigned to some UID. And if you want to convert that into something else, then I guess you need to join the assigned to and user ID. Assigned to and maybe profiles table along user ID, and it has to be an inner join. So this is just kind of like recording information about which tables need to be joined. And then what is this columns things? This constant defines the columns that can be selected in a query and or displayed in a bug list. Cool. Then here's a constructor. A new note that the params argument may be modified by Bugzilla search. So I guess there's a new search, and it's going to create this sort of table. And then we have underscore SQL. And then we're going to call charts to conditions to get joins and clause. And if the clause is not a string, we'll do some like error out, I guess. Otherwise, we're going to join SQL select separated by commas. That's going to give us a select. And then we're going to call SQL from joins to take the joins. And that gives us our from clause. And we get our where clause similarly by calling SQL where on clause. And we get a group by, etc. And then I guess we ultimately execute SQL. Let's look at one of these. How about SQL from? Here's subroutine SQL from. We're going to get the arguments of the subroutine, I suppose. And we're going to set @ joins. I guess @ is array. to itself standard joins and select order joins and joins input. Maybe maybe extra joins you've asked for. And then we're going to call extract then to on the joins, and then we're going to call combine joins. And then the join SQL is going to be, I guess, a map from whatever translate joins is to joins. Then we're going to return the string bugs, empty string, join. I guess the string is the thing that's going to be ultimately passed into the SQL engine. Here's translate join. This takes a join data structure and turns it into an actual join SQL. So we saw the join data structure before. It somehow encoded information about what tables needed to be joined. There's some error checking up here. We'll ignore it. We get the join info bug table, set it to from table, join info from. And so this is just going to be parsing some data structure, I guess, and cobbling together some stuff. And it doesn't look that interesting. And I guess I'm not going to dig too deeply into it. But overall, this whole thing I think is pretty interesting, the way that they do search. Then maybe we can take a quick look at query. Get product values. I'm not sure if this means products in the sense of the products, the software products that are known to Bugzilla. Here's the main script. Nuke default query. Check hash token, blah, blah, blah. We're going to switch to ShadowDB. You're done with changes committed to the DB. And we get a user default query, which I guess is this thing. And some prefill form. We pass the defaults as a hash references to arrays. Yeah. I'm not seeing a ton here other than kind of moving things around from one format to another, I guess, is kind of what it looks like to me so far. And then there's a bunch of like strings here that encode like defaults and whatnot. So sort order is some stuff about bug number, importance, assigning, last changed. Yeah, so to me, it seems like query is just kind of marshaling the data into the right structures. Then the search stuff we looked at is where the magic mostly happens. So I'm gonna call it a day there. Just about an hour. So what did we learn? This was a relatively simple, I think, app compared to a lot of the stuff that we've looked at. This is maybe the first one where we've seen things like keeping track of user IDs and just like interfacing with the database. And I guess the sense I'm coming away with is that one of the things that probably made Bugzilla special at the time was one, it had a really well thought out model for workflow, and that workflow more or less seems to work for a lot of people. Google IssueTracker seems to adopt a lot of the same workflow stuff, but it's much more. You can configure it more. There's less stuff that's kind of baked in, and that's one of the things that the Monorail developers said about the kind of Chromium version of IssueTracker. So the fact that kind of workflow works so well for such a huge multinational corporation in 2023, I think speaks a lot to it having been a pretty good design back in 1998. Now I imagine that design owes a lot to whatever bug trackers came before and best practices and stuff like that. And the other thing that it seems like Bugzilla did well, or maybe still does well, is that their search stuff was a lot more involved than I thought it would be. And so if, compare the natural thing to do, I think, if you're not willing to implement your own search engine, is to sort of call out the SQL. And it kind of feels a little bit like some of the GitHub search functionality is limited. And I would bet that people who use Bugzilla daily have a good sense of how to how to craft searches that are really informative, and that when they switch to another bug tracker, they might find that the search functionality is restrictive. That being said, we probably have better like off-the-shelf search engines than we did in 1998. So there are probably other more updated ways to do things. And maybe when the Bugzilla Harmony stuff comes out, that will have an interesting take there as well. I'm not sure. So that's all for me. Tomorrow we're taking a look at eBPF, and hope to see you there. Thanks.